Today's show is sponsored by the multiorgasmicmama.com. If lack of confidence, low libido, or guilt and shame around your sexuality are the cause of your bedroom woes, the hot wild sex you never have anymore, or the transition into motherhood that sucked your libido dry, let me help you get your mojo and magnetic feminine spark back. Magic, miracles, total self-love, and multi-orgasmic bliss included. See you at the multiorgasmicmama.com. What's up, hot mamas? Welcome back. It's Tilly here with a short and sweet episode on vibrator addiction. Are you addicted to your vibrator? Do you love your vibrator? Is it the only way that you can have an orgasm? If so, then this episode is for you. So I'm going to tell you point blank that I am honestly not a fan of the vibrators. I have one. I use it maybe once a year, and that is about it. And I'm going to tell you why I am not a fan of it, because I talk to so many women day in and day out, get emails and messages about it all the time, with women asking me, how do they have an orgasm from penetration, or how do they have an orgasm in a different way without their vibrator? Because for a lot of women, if that's how you got wired to have an orgasm with a vibrator, then sometimes it's the only way that you can. And I'm going to explain more about that in a minute. So the thing with vibrators is that it can be very liberating and empowering. And if you love your vibrator and it feels amazing for you to be able to use it and have an orgasm, good on you. Good on you. Like, no shame whatsoever in that. That is awesome. But the problem that I see so many times and hear from many of you listening here today is that when you use a vibrator and it's the only way that you can have an orgasm, that actually feels limiting to you, that it feels like an issue for you. So it's only an issue if it's an issue. I'm not telling you to have an issue because you like your vibrator, but if it is an issue and you feel that the intimacy and connection in your relationship is being thwarted because you're addicted to the vibrator and you can only have an orgasm from the vibrator, or if you feel like it's limiting the orgasmic experiences that you know you're capable of, but you haven't actually given your body the time to develop new pathways to achieve orgasm, then it can be an issue. So if you're wondering what vibrator addiction is in particular, let me just explain in detail. It's where you have trained your body to only orgasm using a vibrator. So you struggle to have an orgasm without one or with a partner. Vibrator addiction also will numb and desensitize you in ways that can feel really disempowering and limiting, so that you can only have a clitoral orgasm, for example, or it takes forever to have an orgasm, and then you start having all of the critical judgy thoughts come up when you're having sex with your partner, like, oh my God, am I taking too long? It can be an issue of desensitization, and it can feel disempowering and limiting to the types of orgasmic experiences available. Because if you have been listening to my podcast for a while, there are at least 8 different defined types of orgasm. I did episode 15, I believe, on the 7 different types, but that's before I even had or knew about or had experienced throat orgasms. So there's actually 8. So if you're only having clitoral orgasms, you've literally only reached the tip of the iceberg around your orgasmic potential. And vibrators can be one of the reasons that you haven't experienced different types of orgasms. So let me explain real quick the science behind this. So orgasm happens in the brain. So if you only ever have orgasms in one way, then what that means is every time you do, and you're doing it in the same way, you are strengthening that neuronal pathway in your brain to do that. But you're never giving yourself the opportunity to build a new pathway to reach orgasm, which is why when women join my programs or they work with me one-on-one, that I tell them that if they want to use a vibrator during the course of the program, that's fine, but you only get to do it 50% of the time, because you have to give your body the ability to find a new way. It can feel frustrating at first, but if you really want to become multi-orgasmic and to have different types of orgasms and to be able to have an orgasm without a vibrator, it's going to take doing something different than you've been doing in the past, obviously. Vibrators can be overstimulating and they can desensitize your vagina. This is a problem for a lot of women. That especially if you're one of those that worries it takes too long or you're taking too long and you have those judgy critical thoughts. So if you want to be able to have different types of orgasms and break out of the vibrator addiction, then you've got to get to resensitize your vagina. So the way that you can do that is to use your hands and use oil or a lube and explore with your hands, or you can use a jade egg to resensitize the inside of the vagina and to build new neural pathways to pleasure there. Because the one thing with women that I find often as well is that when they self-pleasure with just their hand, they're only doing it on their vulva and the tip of their clitoris, but they're never actually playing, inside or discovering what's going on inside of their vagina. So if you use a jade egg or a glass dildo or something like that, you're going to create more sensitization inside of your vagina to be able to have G-spot, A-spot, and cervical orgasms, which are amazing. The other thing about vibrators is that it can make it feel safe to only surrender on your own into the orgasmic state. Okay, let me explain a little better here. When you're using vibrators, there's no heart connection involved with another human. So when you're learning to orgasm on your own and you can't do it with a partner, sometimes that's because you have blocks to vulnerability and intimacy and being able to surrender into the orgasmic state itself. And that can carry over into your relationship or your sex with a partner. And if that feels limiting to you, then working through those intimacy and vulnerability blocks and being able to come to a place of surrender because you have trust is the key. And I find that women that have perfectionistic tendencies, women that are overachievers, women that are, consider themselves control freaks or recovering from any of those things, that sex is a lot of times the last place that they're going to find the residual issues around those tendencies. So being able to surrender with a partner into the orgasmic state is often the telltale sign of just how much you have worked through your blocks to vulnerability, intimacy, and receiving and surrendering, which I also did a podcast episode on those topics not too long ago on surrendering and receiving. Now, if you're one of those ladies out there thinking, wow, okay, I totally see how this is limiting my capacity for pleasure and intimacy and vulnerability in my relationship, and I see now that this vibrator thing is a lot of the issue, then if you want to learn to break out of the addiction tendencies and patterns around using it, you're going to have to do a couple of things. The first one is to start a jade egg practice. Of course, because the jade egg is the number one tool that I can give a woman to help her reconnect to her body and to create sensitivity, dexterity, tone, and strength inside of the vagina, and to open up the capacity to experience different types of orgasms and stronger and longer lasting orgasms. And then the second thing you need to do is to work through your intimacy, connection, vulnerability, and receiving and surrendering blocks, which are all basically the same thing. So all of that stuff is deep psycho-emotional things. If you have blocks to receiving, blocks to intimacy and vulnerability, that is a pattern that you developed from childhood as a protective mechanism. So in order for you to get past that, then you have to go in and create enough safety in your body to be able to experience surrender and receiving, because you don't know how. So it's a big rewiring process. It has a lot to do with the nervous system, a lot to do with inner child issues, ways that you got wired around sexuality, receiving, all that growing up. And it's not easy, to be honest with you. It's not. Because working on your sexuality changes every other area of your life. That's why people are so freaking afraid of it. That's why people are so terrified and resistant of doing this work in the first place. Because deep down, you know in your bones that if you were to work on this and do the deep healing, the deep integration around sexuality, that it will change so many other areas of your life, like your career, your money, your sexuality, your relationships. And it can be terrifying to break up the status quo around that stuff. But, you know, if you're fine with having a status quo relationship and sex life for the rest of your life, then be my guest. But my hunch is that since you're listening to this podcast, then you are not someone who wants to live a status quo relationship and sex life for the rest of your life. So the way that you could get started is to head to themultiorgasmicmama.com/shop, and you can go purchase yourself a little jade eggie and at least get started with something now. They're cheap, they're not expensive, and when you buy them from me, you get 3 jade egg practices and 3 warm-up practices for free when you buy them from me. If you buy them from Amazon, you're going to end up getting that jade egg in the mail, and you're going to have absolutely no clue what to do with it. So what is the point? Just spend a little bit more money. It's not a lot. Get them from me, and you get the practices, and you can get started right away. All right, my loves, let me know if you struggle with vibrator addiction. I would love to hear from you. Head to my Instagram at tilly.storm. It's TILLY.storm, and send me a DM. I love to hear from all of my listeners on the podcast because, well, I don't have any way of really knowing who you are until you message me. So would love to hear from you. Head to Instagram, follow me there, and we'll be in touch soon. All right, y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week.